So here we got a T680 2019 model having some issues with intermittent HVAC blower motor. We brought it into the Kenworth dealership. They replaced this harness here. They said this was the problem. We got to get it replaced. So they replaced it. That was $250 just for the harness. So we're sitting there trying to figure out, everything was working great, and then all of a sudden it quit working again. New blower motor in there. Just couldn't figure it out. So we did some testing and we're getting power to the blower motor. So I thought, well, maybe it's the control head. So we replaced the control head, and voila, it worked for about 5 minutes. And then it started back into its intermittent, on off, and there was no rhyme or reason. It might run for 5 minutes, it might run for 5 seconds, might run for 15-20 seconds, kick off for 5 seconds, and then come back on for 2-3 minutes, and then shut off, and shut off for a minute, and then come back on for 5 seconds and shut back off for a minute. There was no rhyme or reason to anything that was going on. So I got some schematics, and I'm looking at the schematic, and I'm thinking maybe it's the connector going into the control head there. I took that apart. It's that harness right there. You can get that connector shell off of it. It's kind of a goofy little thing, but I managed to get it off, plugged it back in. Same thing. Then all of a sudden it worked. It worked great, and then it would turn off. So I tested the fan end again. Now this gets a very, very low voltage signal from the control head. We're talking in millivolts here. It's not a very strong signal, not very, very small amount of voltage. So I tested that, and it seemed like I was seeing some difference. It would go from about 5.2 millivolts all the way up to just under 9, right around 8.7. And then I plugged the fan in, and it worked. And it continued to work. It worked flawlessly for about 10-15 minutes. I'm scratching my head going, what in the heck could possibly be going on? So I decided to take this apart. Here's a new one here. This is a new connector. You got to take this little yellow plastic piece out. It just slides in there. You can pry it out with a small screwdriver. It doesn't take much to bring it out of there. Then there's a little release mechanism in there. You just take one of these here tools, or a very, very small screwdriver, and there's little tabs down inside there. I don't know if you can see them or not. Let's see here. There's some tabs that are underneath the contacts there. You can see you got to pull that tab downward, and then it'll unclip that terminal inside there, and you can pull it right out. So then took it out, and what I noticed is on this one right here, let me see if I can, it's kind of hard to see because I have the flash on. Let me see if I can turn that off here for a second. It's not letting me here. Hold on. Okay, so I got a little, shut the light off there. But here, if you see this little square area here, if you bring your tool in here, you can see it kind of flashing. That little spring clip is broke. It's not creating enough pressure and tension, spring pressure and tension on the pin inside the motor. We're talking millivolts here. We're talking very, very low voltages. Here's a new one that I took out. And as you can see, this one, this is a brand new one here. And this one here, it springs back and forth, but it doesn't move as much as the other one does. They're very, very, it's a lot better pin drag too. I got some resistance here when I put that in and pull that out. This one here, I got nothing. It's very, it's almost non-existent. It just doesn't have that nice drag. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to take this, cut this off. When you buy a new Paccar HVAC fan blower, you get a new one of these harnesses. If you get like an ottoman or whatever, they're not going to come with this. I don't know. I'm looking to see if I can get these extra aftermarket, because I don't have, necessarily these terminals and connectors. If you had the terminals and connectors, you can certainly replace it. But I just don't know if I have the proper ones. I probably, maybe if I dig hard enough, I might have something that will work. But anyway, that was, we're thinking that this is part of our intermittent fan issue. So we'll see if this, we'll get this replaced. We'll see if it works. All right. So after it was all said and done, as you can see, we got the dash put all back together again. The problem with the HVAC was the fact that this blend door was the issue. There's 5 actuators in these Kenworths, and with those actuators, they they have to go through a calibration. And we had this blend door after I was, monkeying around, and I fixed the harness, and that didn't seem to cure the problem. We decided to change out the control head just to see if that would do anything. Excuse me. And the control head, we put a new control head in there, and it was, those were like $600. They're not cheap. And we put the control head in there, and she went through her calibration, and fan started working. It ran for 20 minutes, never even skipped a beat, until I started messing with the knobs. Then all of a sudden, she shut off. Fan was at full speed, fan would shut off. And I could hear, now that I had most of the dash pulled apart, I could hear this little whirring sound, this little, like a motor turning. And it was one actuator. And it never actually, with these blend doors, they'll turn like such. Okay. So whenever that blend door hits its maximum swing one direction or the other, the motor starts drawing more amps because it wants to keep moving, but now it's up against something. Now it can't turn that blend door anymore. There's a circuit board in that actuator that senses that. And the control head sees that. And it goes, oh, okay, I'm at my closed position. So now I'm going to try to open it. And it starts to open it, and it turns it one direction. And if it doesn't work, it turns it back the other direction. And it does this on several times until it gets a good feel for the position of what that blend door is in and which direction it needs to go to make the magic happen. Well, problem is that this blend door, as you can see, I'm going to zoom in right here, is all mangled inside there. It's not good. Something had gotten jammed into this blend door at one given time or another. And when it did that, it actually cracked the back side of the blend door socket where the splines from the actuator go into. And of course, it just, when it spread like that, now it goes to move in its position. Now those splines inside there, they just sit there and they just rub and they just click, click, click. They work away. They might work a little bit one direction, not so much the other. And then it's just a matter of time before that actuator will just sit there and spin inside of this housing. So before we took the dash out, I managed to shine a flashlight up in there and see, oh, I got to get a new blend door. Well, it just so happens you can't buy this blend door. You can get 2 other blend doors,
But you can't buy this little 50-cent 3D printed piece of crap. Cat or Paccar does not sell them. You have to buy the entire module housing in order to get that or that blend door. It's hateful. So we brought in someone from Ream Kenworth mobile unit. Um, he pulled the dash completely out of it, and that was a jobber. That was not fun. I'm glad we hired him to come in and do it, because you got to take off the steering wheel, you got to take out the steering column. I mean, it's you gotta do all kinds of prep work, and then it still takes two guys to hoist the thing out and put it in, because it's got metal framing in there and it's got these hooks and tabs, and it's a hateful thing. But either way, we got her done, and um, it seems to be working properly. We haven't really tested it much since yesterday, and so I'm just going to go ahead and turn the key on here. As you can see, the fan just automatically starts working. It's actually lit right now, as you can see, and of course we can should be able to turn it down. Um, we should be all the actuators work. You can temp actuators. You can change the defrost and back and forth to the foot, the floor vents, so on and so forth. Everything seems to be working. Um, so believe it or not, and it was all because of that little piece of crap blend door. Um, this thing hasn't been right for a year. I mean, we've been chasing this problem for a year, and just happened to stumble across it. So it's kind of satisfying, but at the same time, it's frustrating, because of the simple fact that you got to go through all this rigmarole just to figure out a simple problem, and it's just it's hateful. So and a lot of people, I didn't know this, that when that actuator sits there and spins and spins and spins, it may calibrate per se, or the control head will just give up on it. And then, but as soon as, and it might work for 2 days, but as soon as you change a temperature setting, or the settings on, let's say, like the foot, the floor vents, or the dash vents, back and forth, and so on and so forth, like that, that's when that blend door starts to move around. And if that the control head can't see the position of that blend door, because that actuator just sits there and spins and spins and spins, it says, okay, I got to shut everything down. I got to recalibrate. It's so bad that it'll even shut down the control going to the sleeper. You will not get any sleeper AC. I mean, it shuts everything down, and it might work. It might come back and work for 10, 20 minutes. It might work for another day, or it might work for 2 minutes. There's no rhyme or reason. It's just completely arbitrary. So if you end up having this problem, first thing you want to check is that if your fan's not working correctly. Um, you can, if it's like just a whisper coming through there, no matter what you do with this knob here, if you got it on full blast and you barely got anything coming through the vents, there's a default on these motors, um, to where if it senses that it has to work too hard to draw in air, it will just shut down to where it's barely a whisper. First thing you do is you pop your hood, you get into your air box on the passenger side, your fresh intake air box, and there's a little slider door. You just pop that slider door open and pull that filter out of there and check that filter. That filter's probably clogged. These have got a really horrible filtration system on them. We're probably changing those on our trucks once, especially in the summertime. We're changing them multiple times a summer, because they suck in all that dust. Because when guys go into the parking lots, they go into these dusty lots and their shippers and their receivers. In the summertime, they're running that AC, and once that AC, um, is like I said, it's running, and you are now going at a very low rate of speed coming into a dusty dirt lot or something like that, or a graveled yard. First thing that's going to happen is that engine fan's going to kick on, and that engine fan, especially if it's a on off style, you're going to get that big plume of dust underneath the truck, and of course you got the guys running their AC, sucks in all of that dust. Sure enough, doesn't just wreak havoc on the engine air cleaner, it also wreaks havoc on the cabin air filters. So, and your engine fan isn't going to kick on a whole lot going down the road, because that constant airflow coming into that condenser is going to help keep that condenser cool, keep those pressures where they need to be for the AC to work properly. Problem is when you get into these lots and you start losing, or you start rolling at a very low rate of speed, or there's not even a wind. It does not take long for those pressures to go all wonky in the AC system. And so then the engine fan needs to turn on to cool that condenser down, because that condenser is getting too hot, and it can't condense the refrigerant, and it won't be able to compress it properly, and it won't be able to give you the cooling properties that you need. So it turns that engine fan on. When that engine fan kicks on, you kick up a plume of dust. So one thing that you can do to help mitigate some of that, I know it can be kind of hateful depending on where you're at, but when you roll into a truck stop, or when you roll into a place where you're unloading, or you know you're dropping off freight, you're picking up freight, wherever it may be, a job site, whatever, turn that AC off. Just turn it off. Because then if you turn it off, that engine fan won't kick on. I mean, I always figure it this way. A guy could probably, survive a couple of minutes without any AC, coming into a dirty, dusty yard. Or at the very least, maybe crack a window and just shut it down, because that's going to help. That's going to help with that cabin air filter. But if you ever have that problem, pull that cabin air filter out, and most likely that fan will spool right back up again. So just keep that in mind. Definitely want to keep your eye on that. And we have more problems with that in the summertime than the wintertime, obviously. So so check that cabin air filter. If that is making, that won't make the fan necessarily run intermittent, but it'll keep it to where no matter what you do on that dial, you're not going to get hardly any air moving through the cabin. If you get the intermittent problem with this blower motor, it could be two things. It could be A, the blower motor, or B, it could be this actuator issue. Um, it could be the harness, the breakout harness that goes from the motor to the actual instrument panel harness. That that harness has when you buy a new motor, that harness comes with that motor, because they expect you to replace that. So it should be something that should be replaced with that motor. If you buy a Paccar blower motor, if you buy like an Ottoman or a Dorman or something like that, you're not going to get that harness. But those harnesses can be the problem too. This particular one, they actually replaced the breakout harness going from the instrument panel harness through, for the actuators and the blower fan. And I did find problems with that, obviously, in the video before, or I showed you where that little pin was broke. That happens too. I did fix that, but that didn't fix this problem, obviously. So it's most likely going to be either that harness, or it's going to be a blend door. The actuators seem to be pretty tough, but the blend doors, not so much. We're seeing. So anyway, I hope this is helpful, but keep it in mind, and um, I'm hoping to make a few more, and hope this is helpful to you guys out there. Thanks for watching.